Hello everyone, I'm Rebecca Keppel. Today's video is all about big cards. So when we talk about big cards, I just mean larger than an A2. So we're gonna do 5x7, 6x6, and Slimline. So in today's video, I'll be sharing some ways to fill up that extra space and some fun stamps, dies, stencils, and more that you can use for larger cards. So let's start out by first using some large embossing folders to create some great big backgrounds. Here's an assortment of embossing folders that can make cards that are bigger than the A2 size. So I have a couple of Slimline embossing folders. I have two 6x6 pink and Maine embossing folders. This is the wide stripe embossing folder. Sometimes it's hard to see in camera, but there you go. You can see the impression that that wide stripe makes. So that can make a card of 6x6 or 5x5 square card. You can also obviously produce an A2. There's also a plaid from Pink and Maine that I love. Then we have the Slimline embossing folders. These are from Spellbinders, and there are big dots that you can see here. I've tried to do them on different colors of cardstock because the one white that I did, really it's hard to see in camera. And here are the stripes. So these produce a more traditional Slimline size embossed background. Then Spellbinders has come out with this larger size embossing folder, which is actually 8.5 by 5.5. So you could do everything from a 5x7 to a Slimline card. That was the Splatter embossing folder, hard to see in camera, so I won't use that one. And this is the sketched floral. So I will be using this one today. You can see those big flowers on that background, so it's perfect for a larger size card with that larger size embossed image. For this first card, I embossed that large sketched floral background twice. I did it on a piece of yellow cardstock and I did it on a piece of white cardstock, and I'm planning on creating a 5x7 card today. So I've cut down the white to smaller than 5x7 so I could layer it over the yellow, and I'm just ink blending some Salvaged Patina Distress Oxide ink over that white. I wanted the flowers to really stand out, so I'm using mustard seed over yellow cardstock. This yellow cardstock is from My Favorite Things, and I'll link to all the cardstock colors, ink colors, and everything else down below in the description box below the video, as always, if you want to check out what I used. Once I had those two pieces layered on top of each other, I am using some large sentiment dies today because on a larger card, something small really isn't going to stand out. So all the sentiment dies that I'm using today are from Waffle Flower, and I have prints, I have oversized smiles, I have all kinds of sentiments that I'll be using. Again, I will link to them down below as well so you can check them out. So you can see this thank you has a shadow, cut that out of vellum, and then the print itself is cut out of a silver glitter cardstock. And now I'm just going to use some Waffle Flower enamel dots just to accent around and bring out that yellow onto the central panel there, which is lighter. And this is a really quick and easy card, but if you want even quicker and easier, create this 6x6 by layering the plaid embossed over the blue cardstock. So the plaid is cut down to about 5 3/4 by 5 3/4. Again, I'm layering white cardstock of the sentiment over vellum, and then I hide the adhesive behind that by putting it only on the white letters. And that is it for this one. Super, super simple. So you don't have to get complicated to create big impact, large cards. Many pattern paper pads come in the 6x6 format for card makers, which are perfect for those 6x6 cards or for covering the smaller A2 format. However, there are some larger pads on the market that are perfect for creating either 5x7s or long Slimlines. So I have two of my favorite larger pads here. I have the Stamp Market, which is 6x8. They have this in stripes. They also create dots, and all of their pattern paper for their specialty releases come in a 6x8 format. So you can see that you could cut down a 5x7 here. You could even make a slimline with a small margin around it. So make your base the slimline and then cut this pattern paper to just sit right inside. for the Waffle Flowers JJ's Rainbows by JJ Bolton. It's a 5.5 by an 8.5 piece. It's meant to be cut in half to 2 so that you get 2 A2 pieces. And there are some sheets in the pad that are meant to be cut down. So you could obviously use this one as a full page if you wanted to, but you can see how it perfectly cuts into 2 A2s with a rainbow on each side. But there are sheets in the pad that are complete images. So those sheets could be cut down to 5.5 by 5.5. They could be cut down to 5 by 7, or they could be used for slimline card backgrounds. So those are the two pads that I'm using today that are larger size and would work with some of those larger size cards. Of course, if you want to create a large square card, you could use a 6x6 pattern paper pad. They are meant to simply cover up an A2. However, you get the excess with those. And everybody's always asking, like, what do you do with that excess? Well, one thing you could do is make a 6x6 card instead and use the whole piece of pattern paper to create your card. So I'm going to use my favorite things, Pretty in Plaid, as my 6x6 pad today. Okay, I'm going to start out with a 5x7 white card base here, and I am going to cover the back of a piece of the pattern paper from the Stamp Market pad. I cut it down to, it's still 7 inches long, but it's about, I'd say, 4 inches wide, maybe. I cut about a little bit off of both sides. And then I'm going to cut a piece of the orange pattern paper from the same pad, and I'm going to line up those stripes in the center. Again, I have the big Waffle Flower Hi, Hey, Hello dies. They have the letters and the shadows. So I've cut the shadow out of a piece of pink cardstock and the letters out of a piece of gold mirror cardstock from Spellbinders, and I'm going to pop it up on some foam squares. So that's a nice thing to do on a big impact card like this, is pop up that large sentiment so it really stands out from the background pattern paper. Super, super simple, quick and easy to do. For my large 6x6 card, I am just going to trim down the pattern paper a little bit, just to 5 3/4 by 5 3/4, but that isn't a ton of waste. And I'm going to lay that right on a piece of 6x6 white cardstock. So you can see this is a great way if you love a pattern, like I love this rainbow plaid, you get to see the whole thing on the card, which is really nice. I'm going to use some tape runner to adhere the hello from that Waffle Flower die set that I talked about before onto some vellum of the background there. And then I'm going to hide my adhesive behind those white letters and just adhere that down onto the card. And I love this just as is, but I wanted to add a little detail to the hello. So I'm going to use the Lawn Fawn Sparkle Glaze, which I think we've kind of all determined and agreed that it's really great for dots. So I'm going to create some sparkle glaze dots on the letters just to give them a little texture, just to give a little bit of extra interest to this otherwise quick and simple large card. Stencils are also great. I love that a 6x6 stencil can easily cover an A2 card, but you don't have to cut it down. Why not use it to make a large square card instead? So I have two different stencils here. The 6x6 stencil that I have is from Hero Arts. I really love that one. I've used it before, and so I'm not actually going to use it today. The other stencil I have is a Slimline stencil set. It's 3 stencils, and this one is from Pink Fresh Studio. So I just want to show you the design. You can see it's like a sunburst, and each layer of the stencil adds another layer of that sunburst. So I'm going to use some Thermoweb Pixie tape behind that stencil. I'm using white cardstock cut down to like a slimline size so that I can ink blend on top of the stencil. And I'm going to tape it down to my glass mat as well. I'm going to start out with some Distress Oxide Sponge Sugar, and I'm using Tim Holtz's domed foam blenders. I really want quick, even, consistent coverage here, and I like the dome foam blenders for that. Even though they can sometimes be a little tricky getting into the little bits of the stencil, brushes sometimes are easier. I just tend to reach for these because I have one in each of the colors of the Distress Oxide ink. I'm going to just trim that down so there's no white space on the sides there, and then I'm using the Hi, Hey, Hello again. This time I'm using Hey, and I'm going to this time really pop this up. So I've cut out a piece of pink cardstock in the shadow layer, and I've also cut out a piece of white fun foam in the shadow layer, and that's what I'm gluing together right now. Now I have the white fun foam hay and some really fun silver cardstock for the hay letters on top. This way, both the letters and the shadow are popped up, and they're popped up perfectly because of the fun foam. It stretches from end to end of the die cut. And then I'm just going to adhere that all down with some liquid adhesive. And last but not least, I'm going to add a little bit of embellishment. These are those Spellbinders silver gems that I have, and I just love this card. Super, super simple, easy to create, and a big impact. Let's not forget about dies. There are some dies that are made just to cut out an A2 card front, but there are plenty of dies for creating larger size cards as well. For this card, I'm heading back to the JJ's Rainbows pattern paper. I'm going to cut a Slimline die out of white cardstock, and I'm going to back it with this rainbow pattern paper. So you can see that it will fit perfectly on that 8.5 by 5.5 piece of pattern paper. So the die that I cut out is from Catherine Pooler, and I am putting some liquid adhesive around the edges and in the major areas in the center just to make sure it stays down. I'm going to press that down onto the pattern paper, and then once it's dry, I'm just going to trim off the excess. Now that's a rainbow on the side there, so I'm going to keep that for sure, but I'll use it for maybe some small die cuts later. This time I'm using Waffle Flower's Oversized Smile stamp set and matching dies. And I have the smile cut out of black cardstock. I'm going to just put the little dot of adhesive on the vellum background and place that dot of the eye right on top. And then I'm going to stamp a sub sentiment on some white cardstock with some black ink. And it just says, "Sending you So I'm using my mini Misty so that I can double stamp that, and you can see how like lightly I tapped the ink so it doesn't smear or get too globby there. And then I'm just going to trim that down by putting one side through my Tim Holtz trimmer and then trimming off the excess, and I get a nice sentiment strip out of that. I'm going to hide the adhesive once again behind the cardstock of the smile so that you won't see it coming through the vellum at all. And I'm just going to lay that down on the right hand side of the card, and then I'm going to cut some foam squares in half so that I can pop up the "Sending You" so that it doesn't get lost in that nice busy background with rainbow and the Slimline die cut. For this card, I'm going to share how I make a shaped card base. I'm going to fold this 8.5 by 11 piece of white cardstock in half. I'm going to place the largest die hanging off the top where the fold is. So the very top of the butterfly's wings hang off the fold. This way, when I die cut it, I have the fold intact in those two places. What I'm going to do to cover up those flat lines on the top of the butterfly is to put adhesive all over the white card base. I cut another large butterfly out of yellow cardstock, and I'm going to place that right on top, lining it up at the bottom so that I know that it's straight, and that will cover up those flat areas at the very top of the wings. You could cut another one for the back if you so desire, but I don't think that's such a big deal. Nobody's going to look at the back of your card and judge it there. So I'm going to cut out the smaller butterfly that's included in this die set. This is from Spellbinders, and I cut it out of orange cardstock, and I'm going to layer that on top of the yellow, put a little bit of tape runner in the middle of the butterfly, and lay the butterfly's body, which I cut out of Spellbinder's Gold Mirror cardstock, and I'll share why I did that in a second. But first, I'm going to put some of the flowers from the die set, and they are layered flowers, so if you cut them out of two different colors of cardstock, you can layer them on top of each other and create some really nice interest in these flowers pretty easily and quickly. I also cut out the flower centers in that same Gold Mirror cardstock, and I am popping up these flowers so that they really stand out from the background of that beautiful big butterfly card. So they also have some leaves, a stem, and there is another small layered butterfly. So if you cut out two different colors and then cut the detail layer out of one of those colors, you get this really nice layered effect. Okay, for this sentiment, I am using the thank you dies from Stamps and Dies from Waffle Flower. So I'm going to stamp and heat emboss the thank you in gold embossing powder, and then cut it out with those matching dies using some pink pixie tape to hold it in place. And then I'm going to pop up that sentiment die cut and just kind of place it right behind the wing of the smaller butterfly there. So you can see when I open the card, the back of the butterfly's body is also gold because the gold mirror cardstock is double-sided. Here's a couple of tips on making large card bases. For Slimline, I place it in my score tool and I mark where the edge is. Then I score the 8.5 by 11 at that edge. This one was 3.5. So then I fold at that edge, and then what I'm going to do is place the long end into my trimmer and just trim it off. This is a way that you don't have to measure the width of the card before it's folded. So to me, this is super, super easy. Then all you have to do is put some tape runner or adhesive on the front and lay your card panel on top, and it should perfectly match and just fit without, again, having to measure or worry about how wide or long that card needs to be. Okay, for a 5 by 7, I'm gonna score it at 5 and then fold it at that 5 mark. And I'm gonna do the same exact thing. I'm just gonna trim off that little excess by putting the long end into the trimmer first and then trimming it where the two pieces meet. Then I am actually going to put it back in my scoreboard and score at 7 so that I know exactly where to trim on this trimmer that doesn't go to 7 inches. Again, just really makes it easy for me to not have to worry about, okay, subtracting and figuring out the math of a double edge before it's folded or after, that kind of thing. Then just put adhesive on the front and lay that card right down, and you've got a perfectly shaped 5 by 7 card base with that panel. So if you love getting large in your card making, try out some of these ideas, use some of these supplies, or just use what you have to make a 5 by 7, 6 by 6, or Slimline card. As always, I want to thank you so much for spending time with me today. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you again soon. Many pattern paper Peter Piper picked. That's right. It's over here. I know. Did I point at you all? It's kind of rude. You. Just settle down. Did you hear available? Available. Oh, good times. All right.